Hey, what's going on everyone? Tone here, and today we're going to do a post-mortem of our Let's Play Cogmind Season 1 that we just wrapped up. And in an untimely death, unfortunately. But I wasn't originally going to do this because I didn't think there was a whole lot to talk about, but I was in the shower yesterday and I was thinking about it and I came up with a list of things, so I jotted them down and here we are. So I haven't really structured this. It's just going to be kind of free form, and I'm just going to go through my notes and we'll just talk about a bunch of random stuff about Cogmind and this run and see where it takes us. So I'm starting off by looking at the world map. The last time I pulled it up in game, I'm just kind of looking at our videos. So this is where this is the last death that we died on, so this is quite complete. So the whole path you take out through the game is pretty important. It can give you a lot of benefits, and then we've talked about it a lot throughout the run, but there's a lot of mutually exclusive paths, so sometimes you have to take one thing at the expense of another, and not even sometimes, very often you do. And all that is kind of planning for what your build wants to look like at the end and what your goals are for the end of the game. So this run was originally going to be like a very basic tutorial where I was just going to run straight up the middle and not do any branches and just get a W0, which is the most basic wind type. And what we were going to do is actually, I was going to do one branch. I was going to do Exiles. What I wanted to do was Exiles has a tool called Farcom, and it's basically a sensor array signal interpreter pairing that uses no slots, and it only detects complex bots. And when I say complex, I just mean bots inside the Obi-Wan facility. And only combat bots as well. So it'll detect any threats in the main complex essentially, but it won't detect anything in like the caves. So that eliminates a lot of branches, and it won't detect non-combat bots, which are pretty important. Well, they can be important to know about. They're nice to know about. Not as important as combat bots, of course. It also bars you from, I believe, getting imprinted and getting like the Warlord event. So it locks you out of certain other branch rewards you can get, at least partially. And it has a major downside that in testing branches, if you go there with the Farcom, they detect you as an assembled invasion, I guess, and then you hit max security immediately. And those become very, very, very difficult unless you know exactly what you're doing and you plan it well. There's a few ways to handle it, but you have to be very well prepared for that. And where I fall down on it is that is often the breaking point for most games where you want to go beyond the most basic wind type, because the research branches, we didn't get to really show it off this run because we had a really poor quarantine and didn't get to see testing in Section 7, but they are very valuable, and those tend to be what like make or I won't say make or break, because I don't think they'll actually break your builds, but you can usually find some very nice pieces to build around and plan around for the end game and the extended end game. So Farcom bars you from that, and which makes it, I've honestly never played a full game with Farcom because of that, because I always like going into those branches, and you heard me a few episodes ago saying that I feel like those branches are probably my favorite part of the game, so that's not much of a surprise. There are a few interesting builds and like challenge runs where you take Farcom and go through there that I'd like to do at some point, but I haven't got around to it. And the other thing that Farcom does is when you take it, in Exiles, there's also a vault with 3 very good prototype items. Everyone calls them the Exiles items or Exiles prototypes. And they let you take one item. You have to get Farcom to enter the vault. So you can't actually take the items without having the downsides of Farcom. Except if you steal multiple items, then you lose Farcom. So that's what you have to do if you want any of those items. And I'm not going to go too far into this, but stealing items gives you Master Thieves in the caves later that chase you around. and they're very, very brutal if you are on a slow build, so it's really only reasonable on flight. So that's another downside. So for most runs, it's actually, in my opinion, not even worth taking Farcom or looking at the stash, because you have to take Farcom to even look at the items, which is a little disappointing because the items are a lot of fun and they're great to build around. But for my playstyle and goals for most games, it's not even worth doing. But yeah, I wanted to do Farcom, and then I was going to take Riff for one reason. One of the abilities of Riff, that's the relay interface framework. It's kind of another like allegiance you can do, and that's pretty interesting. And I'll probably do a Riff playthrough for the YouTube soon here. But what Riff does, it actually does a lot of things. But the one thing I wanted for the kind of introductory video I was going to do was that it gives you a exact indicator of what your alert / influence level is. So you know what kind of actions that you're taking that spike your alert, when you're going to start seeing assaults, and when things are getting untenable and you just need like emergency, get off the floor or do something. So those are the two things that I wanted to pair, because you can combine those and they're a pretty nice combo to have. And then I was just going to do a straight shot up through the complex and not do any branches. Well, when we got to Exiles, we ended up with a seed that didn't have Farcom, so that kind of ruined everything. And I considered starting over, but that seed was the it's about I think like a 12.5% chance to get that seed. It has the BFG superweapon later in the game, so that's a cool seed to have. So I figured we'd play with that, and that's kind of what sparked off like the rest of the run for us. So we went with Treads Gunslinging, which is a really fun build. I usually like to take Riff for that because it lets you control your alert much better. And honestly, if we did take a Riff, we probably wouldn't have ended up with the... Actually, I can almost guarantee we would not have run into the issues that we had later. And I'm not going to go into like all the pros and cons of Riff. A lot of people sleep on it, but it's pretty good, and I really like that playstyle. And actually, since I was a little disappointed with how this run turned out, I wanted to go back and just like do another one right away, but not do like the super weapon and stuff, and take Riff and do it the way that I like to play it. But I think we need some more variety, so we'll probably put that on the back burner for a little bit, and we'll revisit that playstyle because it's a lot of fun. Anyways, we can't get the super weapon easily if we go Riff, because Warlord detects you as complex forces, and they're hostile to you. So I don't think... I guess technically we could have like gone in there if we were super powerful and could fight and get it, but it just doesn't seem like a situation where we survive, and it's not very reasonable. So I had to hold off on Riff, and I was going to take Riff leaving the research branch, because some of them have a garrison in them. I don't remember if Quarantine always does, but Testing has a garrison. Section 7 should have a garrison. So garrisons are where you get Riff, so I was going to do that, and then maybe just have the Riff abilities for -2 and -1, because it does a lot of cool things. Again, not going to go into that now. But we didn't really get to that point where that made sense, so we did not do that. But it's very good for the playstyle that we were going for. So yeah, that's how we ended up going from a very basic tutorial kind of thing to more of a advanced series. And I think that a lot of people enjoyed the advanced series, and I think that worked out well, and it was a lot of fun. I think we had a lot of fun, and we were just kind of doing random stuff that I wouldn't do in a normal run that might have been like more risky, just to kind of show off like parts of the game and stuff. So that was a lot of fun. But yeah, let's look at the rest of this world map. And there's nothing else that we really did in materials. I think storage was a -7. I don't really go into storage much anyways. I don't know why. If it's on -8, I guess there's not much of a downside to going there. It has stockpiles of pretty good items sometimes, but usually I just don't find that very necessary for the early factory floors anyways. And we went to -7 and we got Zion. So -6 and -7 can have DM or Zion on them. And I should probably cut out a lot of this stuff and like do its own video at some point, just for like world decisions and branch overlaps and stuff in general. But getting Zion here, I don't think we really got much from them. I would have loved to get DM here. So getting Zion here means DM was restricted to -6. So we had to choose between DM, and we also learned that extension, and the extension chain here was on this this def. Now extension can be on -6, -5, or -4. Probably better that we saw it here than somewhere that might overlap with Warlord. But DM is very good. That's the data miner branch, and it's the lower caves branch. It is opposite of Zion. And it's perfect for this kind of build. Because what happens when you get data miner, and it's actually really good if you're in an extension. So data miner, you ally with them, they will open doors for you that you normally have to like hack terminals for. Which I don't know if you remember, extension was full of little doors to hack, and we actually got through most of them. That's where a lot of the allies you pick up are hidden, so it's great for that. And then you can use the terminals for other things, like purging your alert, which is nice because they're all like level 1 terminals, security level 1. And the other thing that data miner does is there is a chance, and I don't know, it almost feels like half and half, I'm not sure what the odds are, that whenever an assault gets called on you, he redirects them, and then you don't have to deal with the assault. So that is very, very, very powerful for mitigating alert. That does a lot of things, so you don't have to deal with the assault. So that's an alert spike that you don't get straight up from just fighting those guys. And then it also means you don't have to stop and fight them. And every time you stop and fight, you risk more enemies coming up and like just compounding the problem. It slows you down, so then you're more likely to run into like other enemies because they're traveling more, and then those raise your alert. The alert spiral is real, so DM is very good for mitigating that. So for combat builds, data miner is excellent. There are of course other options you can make at data miner that are mutually exclusive to that course for different types of runs, but that's what we would have wanted to do. But I chose to go to extension instead for a couple of reasons. One, I thought it'd just be more fun to do on stream. But two, when we got to Cetus, you saw how we were able to handle those Cetus guard, and we were decked out for like the next like couple of floors, running on those Centrium treads, the quantum reactor we still have equipped. And we were using their improved KE penetrators that we got. Being able to farm those with plus salvage like items. We use EM, which preserves their equipment very well. Oh, also their Centurion medium armor plating that we're still carrying some of. We basically got to use all their gear because they were decked out the way we wanted to be, and use them for the next couple of floors. And that allowed us to not spend a lot of time like trying to find powerful items in the next couple of floors because we just didn't need them. That was very nice for us. So that worked out well, and I was really happy with that because by the time we had a tough time in extension, and I thought we were going to have a rough time, but by the time we finished Cetus, we actually did a great job there, and we cleared that out, and that helped us out a lot. And then we went to Hub, and I blew up the Hub, and that improved our defensive hacking, which didn't feel like it did much for most of the run. It's probably one of those things where you don't really notice it because it probably gives us a couple of more hacks on each floor and various terminals and machines. So it's nice. If you blow up all the hubs, it makes a massive difference. And there's ways you can do that pretty reliably. That's another thing that I want to do is a run like that. But yeah, be able to, so that Cetus guard gear is the same on -6 or -4, but on -4 it's not nearly as valuable as -6, so it's pretty cool to find it here. And then -5, we went to the upper caves, we got, Zhirov was here, we got our plus energy generation, which is quite nice. I don't think we got much else from him. He did give us the Seagemp quest, which is a very probably the best quest reward-wise. But we ended up not doing anything with that. And then we got to our buddy Warlord, which we had to get. Actually, if Warlord was on -5, I might have done a garrison on -4 to get Riff as well. That would have been a good move to skip 0 for, but wasn't an option this run. But Warlord is where we did get the BFG. And then I chose not to ally with him, but we did get some nice prototypes from his stash. And then we got Quarantine on -3. S7 was not there. Section 7 could have been a game changer for us. Testing would have been much better for us in Quarantine at the time that we got here. We had a rough time on -3 research. And then we got to -2 research, which is where we met our end. And yeah, that's kind of our world map and the pathing that we did. Some random thoughts on that. Let me look at my notes here. All right, yeah, let's start looking at some other things. So, what episode was this from? Okay, this is from the beginning of our -2 research. I guess we can kind of look at the path that we took here. This was kind of the beginning of the end. We were actually in a fantastic position here, but we just did not find an entrance for a while. Actually, I'll come back to that. Maybe I can look at that now. Let's find the beginning of the end. It's really right here. Okay. So yeah, this is where we stopped. I was like, this is just a terrible situation. And I had been recording for like 4 hours straight, so I was like eager to get to the next floor and take a break, and this situation prevented us. But yeah, this is where we kind of stopped, so I'm just going to leave this image up and we'll talk about other stuff. So one thing that may have been a good idea for us in hindsight would have been to evolve a second power slot. I did get greedy here. We were probably most likely going to evolve another power slot before going to -1 anyways. So the reasons we did not evolve a power slot is because our build largely was not using much power. The weapons we're using did not use much power. The only things that were using a lot of power were some of our defensive utilities, which ended up being very important. So towards the end here, when we were using force fields and this experimental phase shifter I've equipped currently, we were losing a lot of power. So what force fields do is they prevent a lot of damage, but they transfer that damage to your energy instead, but it's multiplied. So I think 5 times the damage dealt is the energy cost for an advanced force field. It's 3 times for an experimental. So when you're taking a lot of damage, it's saving you a lot, but it's using a ton of energy. So having another power slot would have gone a long way to helping us replenish it. It would have let us use the Vortex Chain Reactor. Not that I'd want to use that this early, because we'd probably lose this, and then we wouldn't be able to get it for later in the game where it would have been much more beneficial. But in a situation like we're getting to here, it would have been great to slap this on. This has, I believe, 700 energy storage, so it kind of saves you a slot, utility slot on energy storage. And also generates 50 energy per turn. I believe this was only doing 20-ish, 20 I think. So that would have been a game changer for sure right there. The reason I waited on the power slot was because in section 7 you can find sort of like the alien artifact that we got in Zerov that gave us innate energy regen. You can find more of those. And if you find like enough of those, then you don't need to evolve another power slot because you're making a lot of energy already. And that is such a great situation to be in. And being able to find out if you'll need that power slot or not ahead of time is great, because that means you can use that slot somewhere else. And our build is already very slot intensive because of all the propulsion and weapon slots that it requires. So any extra utility slot we can get goes a long way. So that would have been very nice to have, and that's kind of what I was shooting for, but it was kind of a greedy thing. I think in the future with builds like this, where I have like force fields and things that actually use that energy, when I get into research, just because of how unpredictable and hairy these things can get, I should probably, the smarter move that's going to save you more times than not is to grow that extra power slot sooner than later. I probably would have done it also if I weren't going with 6 weapon slots for the super weapon. So that's another situation where the super weapon kind of hurt our run at this point in the game, and kind of like what we were doing up to the point where we would have actually used the super weapon, which is really just in the end game. Because that would have been much easier. I probably would have ended up with 4 or 5 weapon slots total if I weren't working towards a super weapon. So that would have changed how we were planning our slots in these last couple of floors. Speaking of the super weapon, actually I'll save that to the end. I want to talk about the pros and cons of it because it's a very strong weapon, but I think this run exemplifies the downsides that you have to take to actually use it. Let's see. My next note says that we had a week quarantine. We already talked about that a bit. Our quarantine was very bad. I'd like to take a look at a few quarantine maps and see what kind of equipment you generally get. So we got the CRM, which was good for us. And this build, Cleanser Corruption. I'd actually like another one in this screenshot because we have a lot of corruption. But outside of that, we got the Subatomic Replicator, which is amazing. But we did not end up using it. I'm not sure if we had anything that would have been worth using it on. I mean, in hindsight, we could have used it on something that would have been marginal in the grand scheme of things, but may have helped a little bit in the situation that we're in currently. But overall, and then we got the phase armor, which is great because armor was something we were lacking. But the phase armor only lasts so long. It pushes damage to your core, which is not something that we needed on this depth because we were gonna ideally explore this floor, explore testing, and then explore section 7. So it's 3 maps to spread our core out on, and to just start transferring a bunch of damage to our core straight up was not valuable here. That's something you usually do on like the last map of a depth when you know you're going to replenish your core anyway soon. You can start taking advantage of that core as a resource and using it like that, basically to save damage to your other parts. And we did use those, but it lowered our core quite a bit to preserve our parts, which is generally the smarter thing, but there are a lot more valuable things we could have gotten, and we did not get those, unfortunately. And beyond just what we actually generated in quarantine being poor, as we mentioned before, testing or S7 would have been much better for our build. Testing is basically full of like really cool like weapons and armor and stuff, which would have been great for us. All right, the teleporter, the transdimensional reconstructor that we're kind of saving for towards the end here, and we use at the very end. If we knew we were going to use that, I probably could have used it a little sooner here, maybe in this position, actually. We talked about this a bit on the last episode, where it's kind of a crapshoot. It could have put us in a bad spot. It actually ended up putting us in a decent spot when we ended up using it. But I just want to put it out there. One of the reasons that I was very hesitant to use that and reluctant to use that and did not want to use that was because that teleporter is needed to get you into Access 0, which is like the extended endgame area that we wanted to go into this game. So that's why it was basically not a resource for us to use at this point in the game, which is why I didn't use it until it was kind of too little too late. A last ditch thing when that part of my goals just seemed like something that we weren't going to achieve if I didn't use it either way. You can get more of those in section 7, but we didn't look like we were going to be going to section 7 here either way, so yeah, we just ended up using it. But otherwise, if you have several of those, they're very good for getting out of situations like this. They teleport you somewhere random, but everyone that was chasing you forgets about you, so it kind of gives you like some serious breathing room, and then you might be able to make something out of that. Let's see. Positioning. So right here, this was a pretty bad place to have to be fighting all of this. Now it would have been nice to be able to fight these guys from the doorway or in this corridor. I don't believe we had that luxury. Let me see if I can back up a little bit. So yeah, we're up here at this point. Taking advantage of our positioning, fighting the stuff behind us, fighting the stuff coming forward. The hunters kind of screw up our positioning a bit because they can shoot through walls. I'm not even going into siege mode right now because I want to be able to keep moving. I wonder if going into siege mode right here would have been good in the long run, but we couldn't really predict that. Right now I'm freaking out because we just set off high security lockdown. So then we keep moving. There was no reason to sit there, and then we get caught out here. And that's where things started getting bad because we started getting assaults. That behemoth was like the unluckiest thing. We knew he was up here. I don't know who called his attention. Like a watcher ran by and called him. That was like the unluckiest thing when that behemoth showed up. But yeah, so positioning. I guess the question was whether we should have gone into siege mode sooner, maybe, once we were in this spot. Walking back over here wasn't going to be that great. And at this time, the goal was to kill this guy, and then just keep moving. We just need to keep moving the situation. Just sitting in one place and fighting isn't going to get us anywhere. But then pretty soon, this is what happened when we did try to leave. So we went back into the room to take advantage of that wall. Just a bad situation all around. Yeah, so we went back in here. I'm still trying to avoid going to siege mode. That 5 turns is pretty taxing in this situation. In hindsight, I mean, we should have been in siege mode because it didn't work out for us either way, but I don't think it was worth going into that point. Another thing to consider is whether having 6 treads would have been a good idea. Well, these biometals are actually moving at pretty good speed, but I think we would have been down to 145 if we had 6 treads. We're barely overweight. That's another problem that the BFG gave us because it's making us use more storage, which is putting us overweight. But you're generally overweight when you're running only 4 tread slots. So 6 treads has a few advantages, and yeah, the big one is that you get to not be overweight, and that makes you a bit faster. So if we were running at 145 instead of 165, which I think is what we would have been at, that's a pretty big improvement in my eyes. I value speed a lot more than a lot of people seem to. A lot of people are just the normal is being overweight on treads or legs. But I actually try to avoid it a lot of the times because these kind of alert spirals that we got us into this mess are greatly mitigated by an increase in speed, because that lets you travel more before getting assaults, exterms, before running into patrols, and then just that compounds, and that lets you keep alert low and explore more of the floor per fight, essentially, if that's the way you want to look at it. Explore more of the floor per alert gained. So I think speed is very valuable. So that was another option, but we were already super tight on utility slots, partially because of the storage needed for the super weapon, partially because of the weapons build we're going for. So I don't know if that's super amenable to what we were doing here. Another thing that having extra propulsion slots does is it gives you, when you're using treads, a further accuracy bonus, and it reduces your, going from 4 to 6, reduces your recoil reduction that treads give you from -4 to -6, which most guns that you're going to be using on treads are only -4 anyways. All the guns we're using have a max of 4 recoil. Once you get into multi-rails, which are very fun and very powerful guns, those are -8 recoil. So that's when having -6 could become helpful, depending on how many of those you end up equipping. But the thing that I picked up since Siege Mode got added, which was relatively recently, is that reduces your recoil altogether. So you could run a bunch of cannons and multi-rails or whatever you want and just use Siege Mode to mitigate all recoil. And it also gives you a massive boost to your accuracy. So if you're running heavy treads, I think Siege Mode gives you a lot of leeway to not use additional treads. And then you're just missing out on the speed, essentially, and you get the other bonuses. Although your speed becomes a lot slower when you're relying on Siege Mode a lot, because then your 5 turns before and after fights, essentially, are getting wasted. So I don't think this build could have benefited from more tread slots. That wouldn't have helped us that much. Another thought that I've had, and I think maybe this treads gunslinging build is not a very optimal build to begin with. It's a very, very, very fun one in my opinion, and it's one I'm going to keep playing and enjoy playing. It's just a blast. But it is very slot intensive in ways that a lot of other probably just as effective builds aren't. And that is because you need a lot of propulsion slots and a lot of weapon slots. If we were using like legs and thermal cannons, the tripod is a popular leg build, which only uses 3 prop slots. I think 3 to 5 legs is probably pretty common. 5 is probably really pushing it. You'll never see more than that. And so legs are faster than treads to begin with. And so even if you're overweight, you're going to be faster than treads, or probably as fast as underweight treads. So it's kind of a wash there. Legs do not give you the accuracy and recoil benefits of propulsion or treads do. So usually you're going to want a utility slot for a targeting computer, which increases your accuracy, at least one of those. Speaking of which, the benefit of getting extra slots, or accuracy from treads and recoil reduction in a lot of situations beyond 4 treads, I think an extra utility slot just for a targeting computer outweighs them. And also you can't look past the coverage and integrity that a lot of treads have. So that is a big advantage as well. So they're kind of being treated as armor. But treads are rare enough that using them as armor and losing them can be a bad thing. A good thing about legs is those are, to a lesser extent, do soak up a lot of hits. They have decent coverage and decent integrity. Legs are incredibly common. Look at all the legs on our screen right now. So you can just restock on legs from anyone, just to keep moving. And then when you find a stockpile, it's just like extra gravy for you there to just make everything better. So that's a nice benefit to legs. And then to offset the recoil issues that you get with legs, you end up just using energy cannons usually. Like our Nova cannons that we have here, our Herf cannons. Those have no recoil, they don't have minus salvage, they're very strong, and you really don't want more than 3 slots for them. That saves you 2 slots over what we're doing right now. The downside with that is you don't get the gunslinging benefits, and you don't get the crits. Another thing with this is that it also requires a lot of processors. We're probably not using a target analyzer, and probably not, the core analyzer isn't nearly as important for using these energy cannons. So that frees up 2 extra utility slots there. You're going to be spending that on probably a targeting computer and probably some kind of heat reduction utility. We're not using much cooling here right now, although at certain points we did need it. You might use a matter filter, or I'm sorry, an energy filter or something, or maybe an extra energy well, just to power these energy cannons because they do use more energy. So there's a bit of a give and take there, but I think in general it gives you more utility slots, which are more flexible than just having extra weapon slots. So going like legs and like energy cannons, and I think that's gonna be the next build I'll do because I haven't done that in a long time. I'll probably stream that next just to get a feel for it because I feel like a lot of stuff has changed since I've done that. That's a fun way to play. And I think it's probably actually just better overall than this treads and gunslinging build. Now, this build that we're doing is incredibly strong once it's optimized against like any normal enemies. And I actually had a build like this that I took into Access, which is the last main floor. And it's kind of like Research where it's like windy, but it's like much bigger and harder to navigate. And I was actually just rolling around on my treads with all my kinetic guns in high security where we got screwed here, just like destroying like guys left and right. And I eventually ran out of weapons, and I just ripped everything off and grabbed flight units and then ran to the exit. I was looking for the command exit to go in the extended endgame, but I couldn't find it. So this build is very strong, but I find it has a lot of trouble on -3 and -2 when things start picking up, but before you're like optimized. And you're still trying to save some of your like very good items that you only have like one of, and you don't want to lose them here. You want to use them in the end game. So this is where these builds really suffer. So I feel like this probably isn't an optimal build, but it's a very, very viable one, especially if you go with Riff and aren't dedicating slots to like the super weapon. And I can't wait to showcase that at some point in the future. Doing another one of these. Let's see. I think this was a big mistake I made. We should have ditched the armor integrity analyzer. This is mostly giving us value against sentries and behemoths, which we're not like fighting a ton of and probably aren't that much of a concern. They're also giving us value against the melee bots. So, and those guys, you can't crit their core. I believe, do both of them have core shielding? I don't remember. But at least the one, the katana version, or the sword version, is crit immune. So it's actually very good against them. But I feel like those often aren't the guys that are ruining your run. Well, these guys can. These guys have impact weapons, which are indiscriminate, and they end up smashing your processors and corrupting you. These guys are a freaking mess. But I don't think we were getting the value out of this slot that we could have gotten otherwise. Removing that probably would have let me use more armor, heavy armor at that, which I think would have helped us a lot. Now, I don't think we actually came across a lot of heavy armor. I wonder if I left some on the ground from sentries and stuff that we could have been using. Heavy armor is also costly on your inventory space to have like backups and replacements. But having an extra like big chunk of coverage on our build would have preserved like all our guns and our other like utilities and everything to a much lesser extent, or much greater extent, I should say. So we would have lasted a lot longer if we had an extra slot to actually start equipping heavy armor, which I was not able to do here. So everything else was just taking more attrition and damage, unfortunately. Let's see, sensors. I wonder if I should have been more dedicated to getting sensors back online. At various points, we did find a sensor array and a signal interpreter, but I kind of gave up on them after a certain point, about halfway through this floor. I was carrying one or the other around for a while, but then we just ditched them. I wonder if we could have avoided more fights and traveled more before our alert got quite as high as it got here. In that case. That would have been another utility slot probably, because it looked like we probably still wanted to stick to terrain scanning here, which is still very valuable. But that was something else that I wonder if I could have cleared some inventory and made some room there. Our inventory was tight, but I feel like in hindsight, we probably could have ditched some stuff, even avoiding all the stuff that I was just like holding on to for the super weapon. Can we get an inventory check? Maybe one less energy well. Those are so good though. Advanced cooling system I felt like was important. The Nova cannons. We ended up using all the treads eventually. I wonder if we would have been better off with like more backup weapons. I don't know. It's tough. We were going through our inventory a lot. Large storage unit. I think I ditched that by the end. So it's hard to say if we were making any poor inventory decisions, but I think overall we probably played that the way we would have wanted to, more times than not. I made a note here wondering if we should have ditched our treads for legs and then Nova cannons or similar, kind of like we were talking about before. We did carry like a bunch of gamma rifles at some point, which would have been useful. I don't know. At this point, our build is looking pretty freaking nice, actually. So I don't know when we would have actually done that. But that was a thought. Having all those linear accelerators that we dropped earlier would have been great at the end there, when we're just like trying to kill everything as fast as possible and not caring as much about replenishing our matter. But hindsight is 2020. Don't know what to think about that. We already talked about the effect of having so many weapon slots. Oh, actually, we didn't talk about this. So we talked about the pressure that having a lot of weapon slots puts on your utility slots and the rest of your build. This also puts a ton of pressure on your inventory, because you need to have backup weapons in spades. And these weapons are mostly replenished from sentries and hunters, which are relatively rare compared to other enemies. So they're actually hard to like replenish, so you do want to have a lot of backups. So that's another thing about these kinetic weapon builds that is tough to deal with and manage, is now you're having less backups of other important parts. You're carrying more storage, using more utility slots for that storage. You're slower because of that storage. It's one more compounding effect of these kinetic treads builds. Oh yes, so at the very, very end, the end of the end, I'm not gonna loop you into this was all me, a massive, massive, massive blunder. Okay, so we're running on, well actually we're on flight right here. We have 76 core exposure with 76% with 36 core left. I had heavy treads, so I equipped these, and I'm using what is known as prop armor. So treads, high coverage, high integrity, they're good armor. They have a drag stat, which reduces your speed a lot when you're flying and you're carrying non-flying propulsion. Now drag doesn't affect your core hover, so by equipping this and turning off all of our propulsion, our speed goes from 40 to 50, so 25% slower. But let's see what our core exposure dropped to. 76 to 27. That is huge. We're what, like 3 times more likely to survive in this case now. Like a third as more like durable. But the big blunder I made is I did not realize that equipping those, we were moving around 145 speed instead of 50, which was a massive blunder. Massive. I cannot overstate this enough, and I just can't believe I made this mistake. So from turn, let's see, 36,267. About 15 to 20 turns later, 15-ish is when this watcher saw us. I don't know if you remember, a watcher spotted us. We got 2 grunts that were escorting a hauler came up. Those guys, we probably would have avoided them completely if I was running at core hover speed and not tread speed, but instead we took a bunch of hits there. I think there's a good chance. So we knew the exit was over, like in this direction, because I was following the green bots. And this guy spawned, look, Assault Forces Dispatch on 36,287. 10 turns later, this ARC is here. The exit that would have saved us is like right around the corner here. Potentially, if it took us to a branch, we would have been in a bad spot still. But we would have had breathing room and maybe had hope. But I'm still running around on freaking treads here. If I was not on treads, we might have gotten to this exit before this ARC could come out. Man, what could have been? Like, that might have raised our chances of survival to 50% instead of like of 3% it probably is with the treads powered up and running at that speed. But what can you do? But that was a huge blunder on my part, so I didn't really appreciate what was going on when we were playing this, because so many things to pay attention to in this situation. And also, I have the advanced option on that doesn't activate propulsion when you equip them. Apparently that only happens, I think, when you have other propulsion equipped. I don't know, or maybe that got turned off at some point. That was one of the reasons I didn't realize that turned on, because when did I equip that? Let's find out. So I powered that off and then equipped the treads. So these automatically stayed powered on. If I had left these powered on and I equipped these, then these would have stayed powered on, which is what I was expecting to happen there. So I was very shocked. Yeah, there's a good chance we've had like 4 more moves. We could have avoided this if I was moving at core hover speed. Now the Watcher followed us in here anyway, so who knows what the situation would have been then. I don't know if the extra distance here and their extra distance would have helped at all, but I'm not going to pick at little things that probably wouldn't have made a huge difference, but there's a lot of little things that could have gone differently. But yeah, that was a huge blunder, and that's completely on me, but it was unfortunate indeed. All right, what else? I have some more notes here about the treads gunslinging versus like legs and energy cannons. We already talked about the slot pressure a lot. The note I made here was that in a tread gunslinging build, you're probably investing 8 to 11 slots in propulsion and weapons versus like 6 to 8. in legs and weapon or propulsion and weapons for legs and energy cannons. So at the extreme ends, like you're using half the slots, and you have another like 6 or 5 slots for utilities, which is like a massive change. So I'm wondering if that is just better overall. So we're gonna put it to the test and actually do a couple of runs like that at some point. Again, I'll probably do that on stream first, and then maybe do like a YouTube run again of that. I noted that it uses less processors. We already talked about that. No target analyzer, no core analyzer needed as early, but it does use more support utilities. The support utilities, like for energy and heat, are more flexible than processors because you can remove them. It's probably better for a lot of the bosses, but gunslinging is very strong against most standard enemies. Another note I meant, so who knows what's better in that situation. Let's see, I noted Riff with Tread at gunslinging works very well and usually curbs alert issues through alert awareness and operator hacks. That's something we didn't talk about, and I'm not going to talk about here, but it's huge. It does add a little bit more slot pressure on your inventory because you have to dedicate a couple of slots to couplers. It's kind of how you take advantage of some of the Riff abilities. So again, not going to get into that. All right. Well, let's talk about the super weapon. We've been like talking about it for so long now, and you guys didn't even get to see it. So voila. This is the super weapon in all of its glory, the BFG 9000 Vortex Edition. It is a Vortex weapon with 40 shots, 6 slots, 660 coverage, and 600 integrity, so it does not last long if you leave it equipped. And yeah, the vortex and instability here means you after 40 shots, it's gone. But look at this. 400 to 500 damage, entropic, which means it is not resistible. The minus 50 salvage, the way the salvage formula works, means you'll never see a drop from it. So this is pretty incredible. It'll instantly kill a lot of bots that you shoot it at on most shots. I think there's probably instances where you hit armor and it doesn't kill them. But the way overflow damage works, a lot of times you will kill them with like one shot of this. Incredible. The energy is tough, but it you know, if you have an energy well, you can get a couple of shots off. Plus 30 targeting, so make those shots count. You're not going to be missing a lot. Plus 300 heat. That's probably the toughest part to manage. That's why I was carrying a lot of heat utilities that we grabbed from the quarantine guard. If you remember, are designed to resist heat. We had their experimental cooling systems and coolant injectors. The coolant injectors work very well at high heat loads, so we probably would have been at around 200 heat most of the time using this, because that's what the injectors help with to keep you at. Additional heat, the biggest downside is it would lower our accuracy, but 30% targeting, probably not a big deal with this weapon, so we could have managed with this pretty well. So let's talk about what I wanted to do with this, and let's talk about what this is good at in general, I guess. So you don't want to waste this on normal guys, but any kind of uniques, prototype enemies that could do a lot of damage, this basically just wipes clean. You get 40 shots off on it. Even if you consider like missing or like bad shots, maybe 1 to 4 shots against a lot of enemies is probably the range you'll use. So there's a lot of situations where you can use this effectively and not be afraid to use it. Again, it takes 6 slots, so you actually have to have those slots. You have to carry it and all that stuff. But how I wanted to use this, I think it's great in the end game. So the extended end game, I should say. So the extended end game are the branches of access, which is the -1 main complex floor. You can go into command. There's a boss in command. And then from there you can go to Access 0, and there's a boss in Access 0. And this is amazing versus those bosses. Also, there's a lot of tough enemies in Access 0 outside of the main boss, and 40 shots is probably plenty to destroy all of them with no trouble with this gun. So I'm guessing for that portion of the game, just to make all of like the hardest parts of the games like a breeze with this weapon, you're probably going to be investing 20 to 30 shots, depending on how lucky you are and all that stuff. So that leaves you maybe 10 to 20 shots left to use at other parts in the game. So maybe just to make research branches and different other challenges that other adversity that you face, non-issues. So super nice weapon. And with that considered, actually, I wonder if having the slots to equip this at -2 would have been pretty nice. Just so we could deal with like different threats and like the research branches and stuff. Something to consider in the future. Now, you're going to be dedicating at least 6 inventory slots to this. If you're using an energy weapons build already, which probably isn't the best build to use with this, since kinetics gunslinging like we were doing takes advantage of those weapon slots more readily than energy cannons. Although maybe like a gamma ray build or gamma... what is the gun that the programmers drop? Gamma... I can't remember. But the gamma guns are pretty strong. There's a lot of stuff, so I'm wondering if maybe that's like a good transition to go from energy guns to this thing with a lot of slots. In general, I'm not a fan of a lot of energy guns with like a lot of slots because the cannons seem to just be better with less slots used. But if you're transitioning this anyways, that might be a good way to do it. And that way you're using the same types of utilities: heat utilities, energy utilities, you know, all that good stuff, which is different than what you use for kinetics. So maybe that's something to try in the future as well, to transition to this in another life. So yeah, there's a lot of downsides to this. You're using a lot of inventory slots. Those inventory slots are requiring you to use more utility slots on storage. That storage is requiring you to be slower because it's more mass. And then you're forced to evolve a lot of weapon slots, which you might not evolve otherwise. So that removes more utility, more prop, more power slots, however you would have spent those otherwise. You're probably on a lot of builds that would be using energy cannons, for instance, using 3 more slots on weapons, which is huge. So that's a massive downside to carry through the rest of the game, like the mid game really. And that's really what I'm not going to say. You can play ifs. It's a big reason. It hurt us a lot in the research branches, and I bet you we would have done all right if we weren't planning around this. Not making excuses. This is something I wanted to do, and it just didn't work out this time. And so you're kind of making the mid to mid-late game a lot more difficult to make the end game, the extended end game, a breeze, is kind of how I look at this. So I think it's actually pretty balanced in that effect, even though it's a super freaking broken weapon. Now, what I wanted to do with this, so the boss in command is main.c, and they have 2 phases, and each phase has 500 integrity. So this is 400 to 500 damage, and 2 hits you're probably going to kill each one of those phases. Now that's why I brought the particle accelerator. If we can increase the damage on this by 25%, then this is a minimum of 500 damage. The particle accelerator that we had was doing plus 30%, so that hits that mark. So that means we start one-shotting a lot of the time. And if you have an armor integrity analyzer, then you're increasing your chances to hit their core. It's still random whether you can actually hit their core with that. But we have pretty good odds to just insta-kill each phase with 1 shot. And I was also carrying the quantum capacitor, which works on this. This has no delay, so this normally is a 200 time unit volley. The quantum capacitor drops that to 100 time units or 1 turn. So now we're shooting this once per turn. So we could have gone for the 2-turn boss kill, which I think would have been effectively, I mean, I don't know if there's any possible way to do it faster than that. So that's what I wanted to do. It probably would have been the fastest that anyone's ever defeated them before. I've brought this weapon there in the past. I was actually the first person to discover this weapon and use it in a run. That run was quite hectic, and we got into a lot of trouble like we did on this run, and it reflected in my score, which was the highest score for a really long time for that beta. It was beta 8, I believe. 170 something thousand points. I later got 212,000 from an access farming run I did, but I didn't have score uploads on, so it didn't actually get uploaded. Anyways, enough humble bragging from me. Yeah, it was a fun run, but our score was so high because of all the combat. I hit high security on almost every floor towards the end, so it was kind of nuts. And if that went slightly different, we probably would have lost like we did on this run. So, but in the end game, this thing really shone. Now the other boss, the Architect that you fight in Access 0, is a pain, especially for slower builds like ours. And there's a lot of variance and just unfunness involved if you're fighting them as a slow build. And basically what they do is when you bring them to low health, they teleport away. And they keep doing that, and you can't actually kill them until you explore a large portion of the map, which is really hard to do on a slower build like this. So the last build that I had that was treads and gunslinging, and I fought them, I had to fight that boss over 50 times. And I eventually lost to attrition. It was very unfortunate. So it's tough. Now that boss has 400 core integrity. So if you hit their core with this, they die instantly, and then you just skip past all that garbage. So, and that's how I dealt with them last time. So this is incredible for just skipping that entire phase of the game if you want to. So yeah, that is the super weapon. It has earned its name. This is way cooler than the 2 other known super weapons in the game. Another one just got added for the April Fool's Player 2 mode that we haven't discovered how to get yet. I can't even start looking, unfortunately, just because I'm playing on an older version still, and I probably will be until my current run ends. And by the time I upgrade to that version, people will probably have forgotten about it, because a lot of these special modes are kind of short-lived as far as how often the community plays them. The Player 2 mode looks fun. It'll be fun to maybe do a YouTube or stream of it. But yeah, this is the gun, and that's what this run was all about. So I couldn't withhold this from you, and that's a lot of talk about that. Wow, this post-mortem was quite a lot of discussion. I hope you guys enjoy just talk and theory and strategy and stuff like this, because I had fun talking about it myself. But that's all I got to say, so feel free to drop comments if you have any additional questions or anything else you want me to talk about or answer, anything else you want to see, content going forward, because now that this is wrapped up, there's much more we can do. I'll probably be doing a lot of 7DRLs on YouTube to fill the void in the next couple of weeks, and then we'll move on to something new. So let me know what you want to see. Also, if you want to talk about this game and strategy for this run or Cogmind in general, do check out the Discord. I'm pretty active on there, and we have a very great community there. And it's probably easier to talk about roguelike strategy, and we don't even just talk about roguelikes there. It's just a real community, people talking about whatever. But for stuff like this, it's a lot easier to talk about and discuss on a place like Discord. So maybe we'll do that, or you can find the link in the bottom here, and it's easier than talking in YouTube comments for certain things. So feel free to check that out. I'll do a quick shill here. I haven't done this all game, but like, comment, and subscribe, I believe, are the 3 YouTube things. If you want me to be able to, that's how I know that people are enjoying the content, and how YouTube knows that people are enjoying the content and gives it more visibility. So it's the one time I've done this in 23 episodes now, so please go ahead and do that. And it's supposed to help. I don't know. Maybe someday I'll see the effects, but I do appreciate it, and I do like seeing people comment and like the videos. That's how I know you're all into this content, and it makes me know that I should keep doing this kind of thing. Up next, I think my next YouTube Cogmind video is going to be a Riff Botlord build, which is a lot of fun. It's on the shorter end as far as total game length goes, so we can probably knock that out in about a third of what this one was, and it's a really fun build, and people have been sleeping on Riff lately, and I just want to showcase it and show it off. So I think that will be the next thing to do. I'd like to stream a legs or tripod build at some point, so I'll probably do that on stream first. By the way, my Twitch, if you go in the highlights section, has a bunch of archived VODs of a lot of Cogmind runs if you're into that. So do check that out. What else? We could do like DC data conduit farming, and then like either like a tracker build with like linked auto guns or EMDS. There's a lot of fun stuff to do in this game. I'd like to do a lot of it on YouTube at some point. There's so many different builds that are effective, pretty viable. There's a few that are like better than everything else, but most of them are pretty viable. There's a lot of play styles, and that's one of the things that makes this game so fun. Yeah, I think that's it. So that's all I have to say. We are at exactly 1 hour, so I am going to cut it here. Thanks again for watching through this whole thing. I hope that those 3 episodes recently with the audio issues were not frustrating and did not get people to not want to watch this. And I hope the episodes that I made up for it later were helpful to people who found that frustrating as I did. But I probably talked about how disappointed I was in that enough, so we're going to move on. I think we've done what we can there. And yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. This has been a blast. It always feels like a high school graduation or something when you get to the end of one of these long series. It was all the memories. It was a fun one. And I don't know, it's just really cool that people like to watch this content, and I like to create it, and I enjoy playing these games, so cool to have you all along here for the ride. But yeah, I'm actually going to sign off for real this time, so thanks again for one last time, and I'll catch you for the next video or series. See y'all later.